I'm back. I finished welding my hand and tincture bottle together, so I want to show that to you. Then I also want to do one more demo of wax welding with a couple of more techniques and a couple of additional tools to use, just to go in a little bit more depth into the sort of sculptural aspect of putting waxes together. So first, I'll show you our weird sort of Frankenstein of an object. This took me, I don't know, maybe about 20 minutes. You can see that it's pretty smooth, and while there's some sort of discoloration between the two waxes, when you actually just look at the texture, it's a pretty nice profile all over. And I achieved that by using sort of overfilling a little bit and then using the hook tools to smooth it out, and then using a combination of a little Vaseline in this. So it's a pretty nice finish, pretty simple results. So that's that object, and we'll put that down for now. And we'll go on to doing one more wax welding demo with a couple more. So I've included a few more tools and some sort of wax techniques, or wax tools, I guess is what you might call them. Right before I started this video, I poured a little warm wax into just this little silicone pot, so I have that over here at my workstation. I was careful when I walked over not to spill any on the floor, and I have a little sort of chip brush in here that I warmed up in the wax, and now I'm actually going to take it out so I can just do the bristles when I'm ready. And then also off camera here, I just poured a really thin layer of wax into this big silicone tray, and I'm going to use that to make these wax welding sticks. So I'm gonna move this over and clear off my station a little bit just to show you how to quickly make the welding sticks, but since I have some pre-made, I'm not gonna force you to watch me do that. So I'm gonna pop this down. I'm gonna use either my box cutter, or even better is just a sort of sharp tool, depending on the hardness of the wax when you're ready to cut. This is maybe just still soft enough to use the metal tool. If I use the box cutter, I just want to make sure that I'm just scoring but not digging into the silicone. The metal's really a better tool. And you can see I'm just, making some score marks, maybe a ½ an inch apart. These are going to make these little sort of loosely rectilinear batons, which I can pull up out of their little sheet. And then I'll just show you how to make one, but you can imagine, depending on what you're welding, that you might need a few. So then I'm just gonna start mushing it between my fingers. This still has a little warmth to it, which is nice. And basically I just wanna make it round and relatively thin. If you've ever done any sort of metal welding, you can imagine what these are used for, which is to sort of adhere one bit of wax to another bit of wax. So you saw me do this in the other video, and I'm just giving you a little bit more detail now. So this is a good thing to do as sort of the start to any wax sculpting that you're going to be doing. So something like that should do. And then you can have a little bundle of them. Even now it's gotten a little hard. But you can always re-warm it up in your fingers. So I have my wax welding sticks. That's a new trick. We also talked about the wax paintbrush. I also brought over a few more bits of nylon to help smooth. Before we get to the smoothing stage, I've also included some of these green scrubbies. This is a good sort of pre-smooth stage. What else do I have that's new? I brought out the silicone shaping tools that are in your toolbox. These are good for sort of nudging things into place without deforming the wax too much, and also for smoothing and shaping. And then I'm sure there's more that I've brought over that I'm forgetting, but we'll just sort of dive in, and as things get used, we'll talk about it. So I am going to take you through a slightly more delicate welding process that also requires a bit more backfill. So it's a little bit trickier. I'm going to use this this cup that we made together before. You'll notice that I sort of dug into the cup a little bit, so it has this nice depression. I think that will make sort of a nicer surface for once it's in glass, that sort of concavity. And you can see that as I've started it, it's still pretty roughed up. So the first thing we're going to do before we even start welding our other wax on here is just making this area look nice. So I have a clean scrubby and a waxy scrubby. The clean scrubby I'll just start with to help sort of smooth out. I'm going to go in all directions. And as you're watching this is a time where you can speed up the video a little bit and just sort of watch the effect and note the time. It's already pretty smooth, so now I'm just sort of making sure that it's exactly what I want it to look like without any lumps or bumps that are too obvious. So that's pretty good. I'm gonna switch to the scrubby that already has a bit of wax on it, because it's going to start smoothing out those lines a little bit more. It's a little bit like a step up in fineness. I don't think I need to do too much of that. I'm just sort of smoothing my finger over it, bringing it up to my eye. I notice that there's like a little indent here, so I'm gonna smooth it over a little bit more. Right in that center bit, that makes sense. That's where the tools were digging in the most, so maybe there's some unevenness there. Little around the sides. So I'm pretty happy with that. And now I'm gonna go on to taking it really up to what I think of as a wax polish. So I'm gonna take my, what are these called? Pantyhose, nylons, and I'm gonna wrap them around my fingers. And then I'm going to use my Vaseline, and I'm just gonna dab a little bit on. There's not very much on there. And I'm gonna start buffing. And if I need more, I can always apply more. And I want to make sure that this is sort of not moving around too much, and it's really just my fingers rubbing. So adjust the positioning of your tool as you need to. That's better. The combination of the slightly abrasive nylon plus the petroleum jelly sort of makes a really beautiful smooth surface. I'm running in circles. I'll move my hands around a little bit, so I'm making sure that I'm giving sort of even pressure. Looking to buff out any sort of deep, scratchy bits. It's starting to look really nice. Know that any surface texture that you have on your wax, the glass will pick up. You can see on my finger that it's starting to darken. It's actually pulling up just a little bit of wax. The petroleum will, I don't know if this is sort of physically accurate, but for me it feels like it's sort of melting it a little bit. Just that very sort of top surface. just going over it with my fingers, seeing if the sort of sensitive nerve endings in my fingers can feel anything that I missed. And I could really keep going until this is really feeling sort of polished, burnished, but I think that it looks pretty good right now for the sake of this demo. So let's move on to the actual welding part. We'll get back to polishing later when we need to. So I'm going to turn on my little Fordham tool. So it's sitting at about 3, 2.5, 3. Anything hotter than that is not permissible. And what am I welding onto this weird little cup? I am going to weld this weird little nose. So what I want this object to look like at the end is a cup with a nose growing out of it. And I'm putting it on the side because I really like this bottom detail that we talked about before of all those sort of manufacturer insignia. And obviously I've made a choice to do a little carve out of the top, so maybe it looks like it's full of water, sort of a whirlpool. So I want to, so I don't want to disturb either of those surfaces. I just want to adhere this to the side. So I have like a really sort of gnarly looking back situation. And when I put it on the side, there are all of these voids that I have to deal with. So I either have to sort of fill that in or fill that in. And I think that I'm gonna fill this area in and line the top of the nose up here. So I don't wanna use the hot plate because I don't wanna flatten this because it's so concave that I'm gonna end up losing a bunch of detail. So instead I'm going to fill it in a little bit with some warm wax by dunking my paintbrush in this now sort of, I would say like goopy wax, like melted chocolate. Warm melted chocolate, delicious. I'm gonna start filling it in there. And this is really gonna act as a glue. And I'm also going to choose where I want it to live. I'm gonna line it up with the 5 on the bottom. And I'm gonna put a little glue here as well. That is delicious and very goopy. And I'm gonna add a little extra here. So I'm gonna start to sort of build up this area that I know I'm gonna need to fill in. Working carefully so I don't smear any on the outside and lose any of the detail. All right, so now is the point where I'm going to marry them together. And then I'm gonna squish. And there's going to be some overflow. And I'm gonna clean that off pretty readily. Oops. So I got a little wax on my thumb, so I don't want to touch the nose with my waxy thumb because I could deposit wax onto the nose and then obscure any of the details of the pores, etc. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. All right, that looks really gross right now, right? Way too much overhang. But I'm going to now take one of my metal tools and carefully pull away that the stuff that's sort of splooged out the sides. Working to not smear it either onto my nose or onto my cup. And it's gonna wanna pull away at that thinnest point, which is where it connects, which is a nice quality right now. If my tool gets very waxy, I'm just gonna wipe it off on one of my greenies, and then continue to work. So that wasn't fully connected to the cup, so I'm just gonna sort of use my fingers to shove more underneath, trying not to go too far off of the ridge from where the object connects.